What's up guys, Jabrel here and welcome to a brand new episode of NeoVintage News. Now for you guys who have never seen the show before, basically I go over the biggest stories this past week in gaming, and then at the end of the show I give you guys a game recommendation of the week and what I've been playing. So let's just get right into the stories, and this one's actually kind of like a follow-up slash clarification of a story that I covered last week about Junji Ito and Kojima and a possible collaboration between them. So originally it was reported that they had met up regarding an upcoming horror game that Kojima's working on, and he's kind of consulting Junji Ito on it, and everybody was like kind of losing it because that's like a match made in heaven and immensely, you know, powerhouses of their respective industries. For you guys that don't know, Junji Ito is a very accomplished horror mangaka, and then obviously Kojima is an absolute legend in the game industry. So if, you know, Kojima's jumping back into horror after, you know, the whole PT fiasco, him going to work with somebody like Junji Ito is perfect. However, there has been some kind of clarification from Junji Ito's side about actually what happened, and there seems to have been a little bit of misrepresentation, a bit of miscommunication on maybe his end and some people who reported the story's end. So let's just get into it. Junji Ito has clarified that he isn't working with Hideo Kojima on a new horror game, and that this was only a casual comment made at a party. In a past interview, I had said casually that I had received an offer from Mr. Kojima, but in reality it was a remark made at a party where he said, if there is an opportunity I may ask for your help. So I apologize to Mr. Kojima and all the fans who I may have given false hope. So it seems that the exchange was closer to like, listen, if I'm ever going to work on that, hey, I might call in a favor for you. And that was kind of the extent of something. Nothing on paper, nothing official. He hasn't been brought on any project as an official consultant or anything like that. So for us fans who are fans of these guys, you know, we're gonna hold out hope that this collab actually does happen. But for right now, I think it's important that we kind of temper our expectations. So I guess we can move right into the next story here. Splinter Cell TV show. So apparently Netflix and Ubisoft's first project together is an animated adaptation of the gaming publisher's Splinter Cell series, the company announced. So far we know that there's going to be around 2 seasons set to be released right now, over 16 episodes, and that the John Wick writer Derek Kolstad is set to oversee the project. Now it's interesting to see this because another kind of video game property that is being made into a show is My Friend Pedro, that also I believe has a John Wick director tied to it. So it's interesting seeing people cross over from the John Wick movie franchise into gaming adaptations. Splinter Cell, for you guys that don't know, Ubisoft-owned stealth action franchise. It's been inactive for a little bit. They had a game, and I forget the name, Blackpoint, I believe, maybe in like 2013 or something like that. But generally, the franchise has been inactive for quite a few years now. The last time we got anything Splinter Cell related in terms of the game industry was a bit of DLC that was released in what is it, Rainbow Six, or is like Tom Clancy's Breakpoint, I believe, which is another Ubisoft game, and they had some Sam Fisher DLC in that. So that's the most we've seen in the game industry related to Splinter Cell. So for you guys who are into Splinter Cell, sorry it's not a game, but it's something to look forward to. And hopefully, you know, Netflix, they put out some good stuff. They killed it with The Witcher. It seems that, you know, if you're getting John Wick writer, they choreograph action amazingly. So, I mean, I have hope in this. I'm not the biggest fan of video game live action adaptations, but as long as it's being done with a lot of care and involved with people who are very familiar with the base material, then I think we have a high likelihood of something getting, you know, really well done here. Because obviously they have the Uncharted movie, God knows where that's headed. The My Friend Pedro is a thing that's apparently coming. There's stuff in the work for like Zelda and stuff like that. The Last of Us show. So we're having a million different adaptations in the work at once here, being done with different studios and different publishers and stuff like that. And we haven't really gotten to see a lot of them released at this point. So it's hard to have a basis of comparison about whether this is going to be good or not, but we'll see. And once, you know, we get more information, I'll be sure to keep you guys in the loop about that. Next one's a pretty big story. Is the Halo Infinite multiplayer is apparently going to be free to play. So Halo Infinite's multiplayer component will be free to play and will support 120 frames per second on Xbox Series X. 343 Industries announced this on Twitter, stating that more details about the game's multiplayer will be shared at a later time. So with that whole Microsoft showing that we got not too long ago, we've started to get more information about Halo Infinite, finally. That's obviously the next first party release that's going to be coming out of Microsoft. It's going to be tied in with the Series X launch. So this is a big title here, and just by the kind of visual styles of it, they're obviously trying to harken back to old school Halo and reattracting maybe some of those lapsed gamers, and maybe some of the people who kind of fell out of love with Halo with some of the newer releases, like 5 and stuff like that. So it seems like they're trying to tag right back into that. And so one thing that people really love about Halo back in the day is obviously the multiplayer component. Back on Combat Evolved in Halo 2, Halo 3, Halo 4, is that people love the online component, playing with friends, LAN parties and all that stuff. So them making this free to play shows, in my view, that they're trying to not reach these lapsed gamers by removing that kind of like gateway or that paywall to allow them to jump into the component that a lot of them want to jump into the most. Now, obviously, when I talked about the story actually not too long ago with Steve from the channel, and he brought up an excellent point that I had to bring up to you guys, that with this going free to play, obviously there is the concern about how are they going to monetize this. So since it's not going to be tied to the Halo Infinite main game, that will be available on Game Pass for people who are subscribed to that. Will they find other ways to monetize that? So that opens the door up for stuff like microtransactions and stuff like that. Luckily for us, 343 is not EA or necessarily Activision or stuff like that, so they don't have a track record for abusing monetization and stuff like that. So as of right now, I'm cautiously optimistic, and I have faith in their ability to release something that's going to please all the fans and not really break the bank. And it seems that Microsoft in general is really playing around with convention, basically, in the games industry. Conventional approaches to launching new games and exclusives and next gen cycles. And now obviously they're playing around with the idea of monetization of multiplayer separated from main games. And they're not the first to do this, but again, right now I'm going to reserve judgment and hope that they do this in a really interesting way that doesn't really capitalistically destroy the average gamer. But again, it's a really interesting development to see them kind of segment that off. It shows that maybe Halo Infinite is going to be a very distinct thing from the previous entries. It's going to be a whole different experience, maybe narratively, but as well they're going to play around with the different modes and stuff like that, separating the campaign, I suppose, from the multiplayer component. So once we get more information, I'll be sure to include that in future episodes so you guys can know what's going on with Halo Infinite. Next one's a pretty interesting story. So Ayuden Chronicles Kickstarter has now passed the funding needed for console ports and a New Game Plus mode, amongst many others. So as of right now, when I checked right before, recording this episode, they've raised about 2.5 million, which is absolutely insane. That's between 25,000 backers. And for you guys that don't know, Ayuden Chronicles seems to be like a spiritual successor to the classic JRPG franchise Suikoden. And the visual style is pretty awesome. They've released some visuals from it, and immediately it kind of brought me back to when they first showed off Octopath Traveler back on the Nintendo side, and that looked absolutely amazing. I have not been the biggest fan of 2.5D, but the way that they're mixing kind of 16-bit art with 3D environments, but keeping almost like a flat diorama effect, is really, really awesome. It's gorgeous. I'm such a big fan of that, and a lot of people were saying when Octopath Traveler came out, who's going to be next to tap into this amazing art style? And it seems like Ayuden Chronicles is going to be the one that puts their own spin on that. And again, I mentioned Octopath Traveler not to, link these games or say that one's copying off another, but rather they're playing around with a visual style that I think is really, really dope and that more people should be doing. And Ayuden Chronicle, I hope it really does well once it's out and everything like that. I'm so glad to see them succeed. I don't know if this is necessarily going to be a game I play. I am not super familiar with the Suikoden games. I played it, probably back on the PS1 or PS2 era or something like that. It's been quite a while for me personally. So I can't speak to, what specific part of that franchise this is harkening back to, or is this a new spin on it with some of the themes and systems of the original games. I can't speak to that kind of meta of it, but again, just wanted to keep you guys in the loop that this game is absolutely blowing up on Kickstarter. It's not the first to do that, and I personally, obviously you guys know that I helped fund with Bloodstained back in the day in like 2015 or something like that. I put some money into that too. Big fan of that. So the whole Kickstarter game thing I'm a big fan of, and I hope it works out well for them. Next one is something I'm super excited about, and it's the Analog Pocket, and we got some new details from them. So we have new details regarding Analog's new handheld console, the Analog Pocket. Pre-orders will be available on August 3rd at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. It will be $200 with white and black versions, along with a separately sold TV dock akin to something you'd see with like the Switch and stuff like that for an additional $99. It could play Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games natively with adapters that can help you play Game Gear, Neo Geo Pocket Color, and the Atari Lynx. So this is an absolute fantastic device that they're releasing here. If you guys don't know about Analog, basically they make, third-party consoles, but instead of having like the real crappy emulation, they play games way more native. It's a high-end experience, and it basically allows you to play classic games in the highest fidelity possible. Now, people who are super into the emulation scene, and stuff like Raspberry Pis and stuff like that, this is probably not for you. But for people who want like a legitimate device to play their real cartridges on at a real high quality fidelity, this is definitely for you. If you're into but if you're looking for something like, hey, I remember growing up with those games, I want an easy way to play those, on my TV, this probably is not for you because it just has such a high price point. You're probably going to be more suited to the plug and play consoles, or maybe a Retron, if you will. But the Analog Pocket allows you to output things at a real high quality. And the cool thing about this device is not only does it allow you to play these games at a high way, it allows you to hook it up to the TV and play the handheld games on the TV at really high fidelity. And on top of that, it comes included with music players, so that's going to really help like the chiptune scene, for example, who deal with a lot of 8 and 16-bit music. It's going to make it easy to extract those files and manipulate them accordingly as you wish. So yeah, the Analog Pocket seems really, really awesome. Am I gonna get it? It's hard to say. Yes, I have disposable income now, but I try to be like discern really well. Like, am I gonna get the most bang for my buck here? Am I gonna get a lot of use out of this? I do play a lot of handheld games, but I also have consoles that play them very well. If I want to play Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games, I have a Game Boy Advance SP AGS 101 console with the amazing screen to play that. And personally, I don't have any Game Gear or Neo Geo Pocket or Atari Lynx games to even play on this, so I don't know if this is necessarily for me, but I definitely know there's a market for them because their SG consoles and the mini stuff like that from Analog have absolutely murdered upon release. So I know this is going to do really, really well for them. And if at any point I could bump into it for a decent price and I have more cartridges to play at that point, maybe I'll jump into it. But this is not a launch purchase for me personally. But I love these kind of consoles coming out and showing that there is a real thirst and want for retro game, consoles and stuff like that. Next one is a story that I had to include to keep you guys in the loop about. Apparently, a series of scam emails offering access to a Cyberpunk beta have been going out. A CD Projekt Red has made it clear on Twitter via a statement: if you recently received an email claiming to be granting you beta access to Cyberpunk 2077, it is not from us. So I linked down below the full statement on Twitter that you could read, and also the IGN story kind of detailing the whole situation top to bottom. But yeah, apparently these emails are going out and they shut it down real quick. So if you get any weird emails saying like, hey, you've been chosen for some weird beta or something like that, they're not offering a beta right now, at least right now. Who knows, when it gets closer to launch, something will come out. But always go to official sources. They detailed down below what specific emails they even send things from. So be sure to vet your sources and make sure that everything is clean before you start going ahead and clicking stuff like that and giving people your information, because their scammers are out there and they're targeting the gaming industry right now, and they know Cyberpunk 2077 is one of the most anticipated games of the year so far. So it makes sense that they're targeting people who have such a thirst to play and get their hands on this game, especially with all the delays and stuff like that. But yeah, keep your eyes open, guys, and be careful out there. Next one, Star Wars Squadrons is only going to be $40. So EA explained why Star Wars Squadrons, which launches on October 2nd for PC, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One, will only cost $40 at launch. So Blake Jorgensen released a statement and he said, we look at all the games and we want to make sure that we're providing the greatest value for our players. And games all have a different scale, and most of our games right now have a huge scale. We designed Squadrons to really focus on what we heard from consumers, which is one of their greatest fantasies, and that's to be able to fly an X-Wing fighter, a TIE fighter, and a dogfight. And so it doesn't have the breadth of some of our other games, but it's still an incredible game, and that's why they chose to price it at a slightly lower level to allow access to as many people as possible who have that Star Wars fantasy. So I think this is generally a good thing that they got ahead of it and started explaining to people. Obviously, with price points is a tricky thing, and EA specifically has gotten a lot of trouble for releasing full $60 priced games and not having a lot of content there, especially with the Star Wars franchise and their Battlefront games. So it makes sense why this one's going for 40, because they're trying to get ahead of it. If they release this for 60 and it's really just dogfighting, not too many modes, not too much multiplayer stuff there, not much to do there, and it's really just kind of like one kind of experience there, and they release a full $60 experience, that's going to be an issue for a lot of people. So they're kind of getting ahead of it and being like, listen, we're going to price this lower because this doesn't include all the content that some of our other games have. This is not Fallen Order. This is something specific for people who want this specific experience. This is almost kind of, and the way I'm looking at it, this is the dogfighting subdivision of the Battlefront games. It's its own little spin-off or something like that, but not necessarily something that you're going to platinum play front to back, get 120 hours out of. I don't think that this is this, and I'm glad that they acknowledge that themselves. And hopefully once it's out, it's at least giving you $40 value, because that's the concern too. It's like, what if they release this at 40 and then you play it and you're like, this is not even worth 40. I hope that it is. The game looks really awesome from what I see, but we'll see. And I always appreciate publishers kind of playing around with price points depending on how much is offered there to a player, because again, the better value you give to the player, the better ultimately the industry is going to be for that. And ultimately, yeah, they're a business, they need to make their money, but at the end of the day, they got to keep it real with themselves and be like, listen, if this is not a $60 AAA experience, it's not a $60 AAA experience. And just because it's customary to release a new game from a major publisher at $60 doesn't necessarily mean that's like a one-size-fits-all scenario. So I'm glad that they're at least responding to what's happening out there. They're listening to people. They made this game because this is something that was asked for, and they're pricing it accordingly for what they're providing. I think that's generally a positive thing. And again, I've really crapped on EA a lot of times throughout the span of this channel, but I gotta keep it real when they're doing something positive, and I think this is generally a positive thing. But if you disagree with me, be sure to comment down below and let me know what your perspective on the situation is. Last story we have for today is a new Castlevania mobile game is coming, and boy do I have mixed feelings about this one. So Konami has revealed an all-new Castlevania mobile game currently in development at Shenku Games. Apparently this is a game developer in China right now. Castlevania Moonlight Rhapsody is a side-scrolling action game like the previous entries that is said to innovate on the earlier games in the long-running series. Innovation, don't know what they're innovating on at this point. A brief trailer was shared widely earlier today by Nico Partners senior analyst Daniel Ahmad on Twitter, and I linked that down below if you want to see the original post, along with the story that has a lot of all the situation summed up. So generally speaking, this is a new Castlevania mobile game, but what is strange about this is the fact that we're getting this announcement not too long after they just announced that their previous mobile game, I believe it's called Grimoire of Souls, is getting canceled or no longer supported before it even got a global release. So I'm really confused as to what Konami's even doing right now. Castlevania is kind of in a bit of resurgence right now. Obviously you guys can see I'm a massive Castlevania fan. I love everything Castlevania, and I try to play everything Castlevania, but they didn't release it in the United States, so I didn't get the chance to play Grimoire of Souls. And anyways, it was a mobile entry. It didn't look that great to begin with anyways. I'm just gonna keep it real with you guys. And so they stopped the support of that one. Okay, I don't know if it underperformed or what. Now they have a new one. From what they're showing visually, it looks a hell of a lot like the previous one. It doesn't look that interesting. I don't like the art style of it. I don't really like much about it. But again, hey, it's new Castlevania. I just don't understand what they're doing because, again, with the Netflix show, Castlevania is on a lot of people's minds now in a way that it hasn't been in a very, very long time. Probably since the early 2000s when the Game Boy Advance and DS ones were coming out. And maybe Lords of Shadow in the early 2010s when things were coming out. But Castlevania as a property was kind of dead for a bit. And now they're coming back, and people are really loving the idea of Castlevania and the lore behind it specifically because of the show. And this is their reaction to it. It's confusing, and they're basically allowing Bloodstained, what they're doing there between the Any Creates games and the mainline games, to kind of dominate that market, which is just strange. Konami has access to this IP. They have lots of the resources. They got money. Konami as a company is doing well for itself. Why they're just not putting out traditional Castlevania games, maybe in the 8-bit style to combat like Curse of the Moon, for example, or something like that, or even something more customizable like Symphony of the Night, where like Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, I believe it's called Ritual of the Night, is tapping into that market. So there's so many different options that Konami could play with, and why they keep on the mobile market, I don't understand. And I understand abroad in Japan and China, for example, mobile gaming is just different than it is in the States. It's doing well more, it makes a lot more money, these type of games, people put way more time into it, they're playing on their commutes and stuff like that. It's a whole different culture, it's a whole different dynamic. I understand that. But the lack of worldwide support, the canceling one to launch another one that doesn't look like it's doing too much different than the previous one. We don't even have a formal confirmation if this one's going to come to the States. So it's like, what is that? Are they going to cancel this one before it comes to stateside? I don't know. And as you guys can tell, it really frustrates me as a massive Castlevania fan. I want this to do well because I would like to be able to play this in the stateside and give you guys my honest thoughts about how this is. But until they decide to understand what Castlevania is actually capable of in the modern game industry, like I don't really know what to say at this point. I'm just gonna keep playing, Castlevania 3 on NES. I'm gonna keep playing my Castlevania collection on Switch, and games like Bloodstained and stuff like that are the spiritual successors to it, until they decide to get it together and drop something in the United States worth playing. But yeah, that's Castlevania for you guys. And now I guess I can go into the second section of the show, which is what I've been playing. First one, I don't have to go deep into it because for the past 2 weeks I've been also playing it. It's Ghost of Tsushima. I'm well into Act 3 at this point. I'm not going to give you guys no spoilers, so don't worry about that. Once I beat this game, me and Steve are going to do a spoiler cast where we're going to give our in-depth thoughts about Ghost of Tsushima, the narrative, the gameplay, everything. Keep your eyes open for that. I would imagine that that's going to probably come within the next 2 weeks or so keep your eye out for that. But so far, love the game. Easily my game of the year so far. I'm heading into the late game content. I've done pretty much every single side mission that's even popped up. I've maxed out my characters, gear. I've maxed out the sword stuff, sword customization and stuff like that. There is some stuff like with my bow and different things that I still have to max out, and in terms of all the armor upgrades, I've done all the armor upgrades and maxed that out for all the armors that I use. Not going to get into the specifics of that because, again, that's some kind of spoiler stuff like that. But yeah, loving this game. No game clock, so I can't tell you exactly how long I've played, but it's something probably between 25 and 30 hours at this point. Next one is Grounded, which is a really, really interesting game that I wanted to talk about. Haven't played a ton of this, but I definitely dabbled with it to give you guys some thoughts. So for you guys that don't know, Obsidian is a game developer known for their JRPGs. They did some Star Wars stuff back in the day. They really rose to prominence with their Fallout New Vegas game. And recently they've been in the news for their, The Outer Worlds? Yeah, The Outer Worlds, because I always get confused with The Outer Wilds. The Outer Worlds, which I really, really loved, and it's basically kind of a sci-fi take on Fallout. And they did a fantastic job with that. And so sometime back they announced that they're going to do something really, really different. And they acknowledge themselves that this is by no means a game that is remotely like what they previously played. And it's basically a third-person survival game where you're changed into a super small character navigating basically what it looks like a backyard where there's ants and giant structures and stuff like that. And it's really, really strange. But upon playing it, within like 5 minutes, I immediately recognized oh, this is not as far of departure from previous Obsidian games than you'd think. The moment I was playing in third person and looked at the menu UI and started dealing with the action stuff like that, it immediately felt like a Fallout game, Outer Worlds and stuff like that. It felt a lot like that. It is a survival game, so there's a lot of meta stuff in terms of crafting and upgrading your character and exploration and stuff like that. And not ammo scarcity, but like different items that you have available to you. There's a lot of scarcity stuff like that. So it's a very traditional survival game, but again, what differentiates it is definitely the environments that you're in and the situation that they present. And I think they really did an awesome job for a pre-release game. It ran well. It looked pretty. It looked a lot better than I thought it was gonna. It had a very stylized kind of visual style from the trailers, but upon playing it, it was actually really, really detailed, really beautiful looking game. And that's pre-release, so I can only imagine once it's out. And since Obsidian is owned by Microsoft, I'm assuming this is gonna come out day one on Game Pass. I believe they said that too on their games showcase. So yeah, so far I gotta say I like it. I don't love it because I'm not into survival games. That's the only reason why I would say it's probably not a game that I'm gonna play too many many more times. It's just because I'm not really into survival games in general like that. I've tried to play games like Don't Starve in the Forest and stuff like that. Not really my cup of tea. But yeah, lots to be loved there. So if you have Game Pass, you have no excuse. Go jump into that now. Go see what Obsidian's up to while you're waiting for some of the other games that they're working on. But yeah, they did a really dope job, and I wanted to commend them for that. And I guess we can end off the show right now with the game recommendation of the week. And this is a game that actually just came out on Switch and Steam, and it popped up on my YouTube, and I was like, oh, that looks really, really awesome in terms of the gameplay style. Y'all know I'm a sucker for 8 and 16-bit games. And so the game that I'm talking about is Panzer Paladin. So it's a side-scrolling action platforming game developed and published by Tribute Games. I wanted to give them a shout out. Shout out Tribute Games. Y'all absolutely nailed it on this game. This game is really, really awesome. It's available, as I mentioned, on Switch and Steam. And the synopsis of this is that the sinister Ravenous and his legions of brutal demons are poised for battle. The situation is dire, but humanity has one final ace in the hole, the Panzer Paladin. It's up to the rescue andrew named Flame to pilot the Paladin and track down all the diabolical weapon keepers. The showdown between the forces of the occult and the power of the cutting-edge technology has begun. Seize weapons from the demonic invaders and use your swordsmanship to slash, bash, and thrust your way through 17 mind-blowing levels. Hop in the Paladin and take up arms. This game is awesome. I haven't beat it yet. I've just lightly, dabbled in it. So, guys, keep your eye out for this one. Give it a shot. It's $20 from the last time I checked, but Switch has lots of sales, so maybe keep your eye out for a sale. I don't know. It's brand new though, so it might be a little bit before it's on sale, but I think it's well worth the $20 for sure. They absolutely killed it for it. I was not familiar with Tribute Games before this, so anything they release in the future, I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for. Yeah, and check it out. If you're into 8 and 16-bit style games and that kind of style and platforming and stuff like that, you definitely love this. This is definitely akin to NES and Super Nintendo era platform, action platformers. The sprite art is beautiful, the environments are varied, the gameplay is sharp and really, really fun, kinetic action, lots of replayability, especially if you like those old arcade style games. And I think there's a lot to love here, and you have to support games like this because people who are really feeding that like retro frenzy in games for people who like me who really like retro style games, I think you really got to support them and let them know like, hey, we love games like this and you should release more like games like that. So that's this week of stories. I'll be back here next Sunday with a brand new episode. And sorry that this episode's a little bit late. I got a little bit sick and it kind of delayed my whole process, but I'll be sure to have another episode on time for you guys next Sunday. So till next time, this is your bro from NeoVintage Games. I love you guys. Bye.